The Intercontinental Derby. What a great name for, a rivalry. The Intercontinental Derby. Well, Jose Mourinho didn't win that one, did he? But he did kick off, and that made the headlines.
Yeah, he did. And I guess the history of him at Fenerbahçe so far has been maybe obscuring the results by what's happening off the pitch, really. Now, I guess part of the reason they brought him in, as we've talked about before, is to give Fenerbahçe a greater ability to project, and he's certainly helped with that. Their worldwide news, but he's dug himself a kind of unusual hole actually this week. So they Fenerbahçe 6 points behind in the Super League, go to Galatasaray for the Intercontinental Derby, as you say, on Monday night, draw 0-0, and afterwards Mourinho's talking about the performance of the referee. Now, why is the performance of the referee particularly important in this? It's because it's non-Turkish referee. Slavko Vincic, Slovenian, comes over because there's been so much discussion about refereeing and the standard of it in the Super League so far this season. So Mourinho, as you would expect him to do, plants his flag and says, I thought the referee was brilliant. I told him how well he performed, and then he relayed how he'd said to the fourth official, who was Turkish, if you'd have refereed this match, it would have been a disaster. And then he starts talking about Turkish officiating in general. He talks about what he sees as Galatasaray's attempts to influence the officials by, in his words, jumping up like monkeys from the bench. And Galatasaray have sort of gone on the attack with what he's said about Turkish refereeing and their group, and accused Mourinho of anti-Turkish racism. Now, of course, since then, and this is very typical of modern debates, we've had a line of African players who've played for Mourinho, so Drogba, John Obi Mikel, players who he's really close to.
Did you see Drogba's line? How can my dad be racist? Incredible from Drogba.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
Saying, well, I know him and he's not racist. Now, look, I don't think Mourinho's racist either. But what he has been is really, really culturally insensitive. And this is something that has been bubbling for a while. Now, I think it's fair to make the argument, and Fenerbahçe have made the argument that his words were taken out of context. Well, I'm not quite sure that's true, but saying that Galatasaray are just trying to stir this situation, which may be true. But what is clear is that ever since he's been in Turkey, Mourinho has rubbished officials, has rubbished the level of competition, has basically rubbished everything about Turkish football. And if you know anything about life when you go across there, it's that you will receive amazing hospitality and warmth from Turkish people, but they're incredibly proud of their country. If you sit there for 6 months and basically say everything that's Turkish is rubbish, I can understand why people are annoyed. I can really understand why people are annoyed. Now, I don't think it's right to call it racism, but I think it's extremely culturally insensitive. And I think really the problem is that Fenerbahçe and Mourinho have brought the worst out in each other. They feed each other's thoughts that it's all a big conspiracy all the time, and they kind of like push each other on to further heights. Look, there's so much about Fenerbahçe that really people should and could be celebrating. The fact that it's got one of the best atmospheres in European football, the fact they've got a really good team at the moment. But I guess all this is distracting us, David, from what's actually happening on the pitch, which is them getting no nearer winning the league for the first time in over 10 years.
But isn't this what Mourinho does? He creates, it's essentially the political terms, a dead cat strategy, where he's throwing something on the table and saying, oh, look at that. Just while everything around them is just carnage. And it is like that. And I think Mourinho's been like that throughout his career, that he creates another situation and a different dimension to distract from potential failings of his own and where he's at. I thought they could have done a lot more in this game. I thought they could have, the particular game where everything's kicked off, I thought they could have done more in this game. I thought they were really risk averse.
Yeah. It's funny because he picked a team that suggested that they were going to take risks, and then the way they actually played and the substitutions didn't really back that up.
Which I almost think Galatasaray actually fell for everything, because they have created this storm now by doing what they have. Fener's obviously hitting back. Nobody's discussing how, kind of impotent that, Fener were. And I think that's and this is what Mourinho does. He's very, very savvy and wily in that sense, and how he creates that. And it'll be interesting to see how the fan dynamic changes as well, because there's a lot going. This has been a very emotional ride, and he hasn't been there overly long. And it'll be interesting to see if that divide also occurs, because if you look at Mourinho and every single club that he's been at, there is a divide. And there's one group willing to run it through a brick wall for him, absolutely with him, almost to a cultish.
And those are generally the players, though.
No, I think there's I think this is what Mourinho can do at teams, at clubs. You'll have that one side who is with him, almost a cult following for Mourinho. Oh, he's just saying a few home truths. He's just stirring things up. These things need to be said. They haven't been said in years, which has parallels to what's going on in Turkey, where he's saying about Turkish football, Turkish referees. And then there's no
middle ground with him, is there?
No. And then you have that other side who are kind of like, look, this is toxic. He's creating a bad environment. His football, his team actually isn't that good. If you did take everything else away, so you have those people, those kind of, realists who kind of like see everything for how pure it is. And that's what he does when he's at clubs. And then when he leaves, I still think he leaves marks behind him where that toxicity exists and the fans are still there, because you'll get a new manager in, and then they'll go, oh, when Mourinho was here, he did things differently, though. He showed players, he told them that he wouldn't stand for this. They would do it this way. And he leaves that behind sometimes. And I do see that happening here at Fener as well.
I guess the actual football itself, and particularly with reference to this game, which they needed to go and win, there's no doubt about that. Because Galatasaray haven't lost in the Super League all season, despite the personnel issues that they've got, and the fact that you could argue the squad's not brilliantly constructed. But really, for them, getting a draw out of this is golden. They're still 6 points clear, which will be very, very difficult for Fenerbahçe to pick up. And Okan Buruk, the coach of Galatasaray, said, honestly, I expected Mourinho to take more of a chance. I don't know if what he really meant was I expected Fenerbahçe to take more of a chance. Because if you know Mourinho, you know he's probably not. But what Fenerbahçe have shown in the biggest games, and when they've played Europa League games against biggest opposition, of course, they nearly didn't qualify. Funnily enough, they've gone further than Galatasaray in the Europa League, despite the fact they've finished in 24th place in the end in the league stage. It's the fact that Turkish football is all about taking risks on the pitch, isn't it? And we can talk about that from not only squad construction, but the sort of football that implies. It's almost that idea of, let's just go for it all the time. It's entertainment. And he's the exact opposite to that. The fact that I remember when speaking to Fatih Terim about this years ago, and him saying when he took over the national team for the first time, he's like, I'm not going to ask you guys to be patient with me, because we were patient for the last however many years. And just defending, well, it's miserable losing defending. Let's go for it. And that really has affected how Turkish football has gone in the last 30 years. Their teams, sometimes you look at them and you think, how can you play this recklessly in the modern world? But really, it makes Turkish football what it is. And Mourinho is completely the opposite of that.
But isn't that just the type of manager? He is a don't lose manager.
Yeah.
He's not a win, proactive manager. Don't get me wrong, he does proactive things to control games, but he's not a manager who goes in, right, I don't think, and people will disagree with this, I don't think he goes in to win. I think he goes in not to lose and then win from that, as opposed to we're going in to win this. And I think that's just how he is, and that's what I say. He's the antithesis of what you've just described.
Yeah.
And just remind me, in this Intercontinental Derby, who's on the Constantinople side and who's on the Istanbul side?
So Galatasaray are on the European side, Fenerbahçe are on the Asian side
Okay.
of Istanbul.
And just a final note on this. What language does Jose Mourinho speak when he gets into all these Turkish controversies?
Oh, English.
Okay.
Every time.
blame
I
it
mean,
on us then.
he spoke it before he got here, but the Premier League didn't create a monster. Well, maybe it did a little bit, but yeah, it's a real shame because the thing is, the fact that people still listen to him shows that he is still relevant, and he created something at Roma that showed that he is still relevant. Okay, like not all the football was fantastic, as we've said before, but he got them to 2 European finals. They won one of them. They lost the other on penalties. They created an environment there where the fans wanted to believe. That's a lot of what happened at Roma, I still think, is the best of Mourinho. But what I think's really sad, and why I said before that I think like Fenerbahçe and Mourinho are bad for each other. I asked him a question when we were over there making our film for OTC last month, saying, imagine, I said to him, if you could create an environment for those European nights like you did in the Olympico at Roma. Imagine if you got Fenerbahçe like to a European final or to a European trophy. And he just sat there and said, oh, yeah, well, you know, referees, we've got a load of injuries at the moment. It's like, you've forgotten. It felt to me like he'd forgotten about what has made him relevant again, really, over those last couple of years. And that's really sad.
It's because he deflects. He's too busy trying to control. He tries to control everything he has. He wants to control games, obviously, but he wants to control everything.
But how can you be
outside?
How can you be so into that state of mind that you forget about your own strengths?
I just think you do. I just think you do get caught up with that type of personality. It goes back to the old Pep and Mourinho battles when Pep used to say, "Look, he's the boss in the press room. He's the boss in the press room. I'm the boss out there on the pitch," and it goes back to that. And Pep,
that Pepper's Kevin Keegan, that was fun. Wasn't it?
Yeah. And that quote just always sticks with me. And I thought Pep got that absolutely bang on the money in that Mourinho does want to control what is said and what comes out of the press room, and I think that's very key to always remember with him.